We're doing the multiple movies thing again. You guys know the drill. 4 movies, 1 title. You saw it in the thumbnail. I'm talking about them all. Starting with the movie Apex. This one's about Brucey, baby. How you doing? This was actually filmed back in 2020, so it was before Bruce Willis's dementia really kicked in, and it is really sad that it's hit him so hard, and I hope that no one thinks that my critiques of this movie or his performance is me picking on a sadly addled old man. But he was totally mentally present back in 2020, according to Google, so I'd say it's fair game. Anyway, you remember Die Hard, right? That movie that everyone says is their favorite Christmas movie, and every time you hear that, you just want to blow your shit off smooth. Well, okay, what if we did Die Hard, but in the woods? Huh? Pretty cool idea, right? So Bruce is playing basically the ultimate badass. He's locked up in this ultra high security solitary confinement cell. They describe it as very advanced because it needs to be, because Bruce fucks so hard. But shortly after that, it shows the outside and it's just like a storage container. They seriously describe Bruce as the most deplorable villain that has ever walked the face of the planet, and maybe any other planet for all we know. The hologram lady says, and I quote, "He's committed crimes you haven't even thought of," and she says that to someone who was a trained killer and hunts humans for sport. He's done some really diabolical shit. What that stuff is isn't listed, unfortunately. His only listed crimes are pretty mundane, at least when framed around such high praise from the hologram. So because Bruce has experience in, I don't know, what's a crime you've never thought of? I literally can't think of any. Crimes just get worse by doing them to more helpless people, or more people, or combining crimes. I can't think of anything new. Anyway, he does new stuff, so he's perfect for the Apex program. The Apex program is a thing where a bunch of billionaires get together and hunt humans for sport. A little on the nose, but it's been on the nose since the Most Dangerous Game short story came out. So I guess that makes this on the nose and unoriginal. Lovely combo. With Apex, though, it's a bunch of psycho killer billionaires that have all been trained classically and contemporaneously in the art of murder, and killing Green Berets and Special Forces members has gotten too easy, so they need a real target. A target with a set of brass balls and a lead foot and nerves of steel and no heart of gold and maybe a silver tongue too. A diamond in the rough. But what does Brucey get out of this? Well, he's our main character. Sort of. We'll talk about that. But he's the most deplorable villain to ever skulk your city streets, so how can we root for him? Well, hologram lady who runs Apex tells him that he's gonna be hunted, and if he agrees to it, his family will be taken care of, including a grandchild he didn't even know existed. So there's the crux. Bruce is fighting for his family, and that's the last time they're ever mentioned. Oh, and in the ridiculous scenario that he manages to kill all of his pursuers, they'll let him walk. Still sort of hard to root for the guy, though, after they talked him up about being such a monster, but maybe that's just me. The problem with Bruce in this movie, well, there are many, but the 2 main ones are pretty funny. The most glaring of the 2 is that both in real life and in the movie, Bruce is an old fucking man at this point. He can't do any high-flying stunts, falling out of trees, or rolling on the ground or anything. So most of his screen time in this movie is him sitting in the woods or leaning on trees and being out of breath. Like most of the time, not even when he's fresh out of an action scene. He's just out of breath the entire time. Which doesn't exactly scream ultimate badass, you know? I get it, he's old. In real life, he's old. Cardio's not going to be a strong suit, but it might have been a positive for the movie if it hung a bit of a lampshade on it. Even if Bruce had a single eye-rolling moment where he thinks he's too old to be doing something like this, that would have helped. But for the entire film, both the film and the characters treat him like he's this unstoppable dynamic force, when all he does is sit on tree stumps and hide behind trees. And the hiding behind trees is the second funny problem. It becomes very clear at a point that Bruce Willis was not on set with any other actor for nearly all of the filming of this movie. He almost never shares the frame with anyone else other than the hologram woman, which is a special effect, which was put in afterwards, so it doesn't count. Almost every time Bruce is in a scene with someone, he's hiding behind a tree as he talks to them, or is eavesdropping on a conversation while hiding behind a tree. One time he runs out from behind a tree, running not depicted, and shoves this guy from a first-person perspective, meaning that Bruce didn't actually have to be there to accomplish it. There is one exception. The most blanded of all the killers does have a brief scene actually interacting with Bruce, but it lasts about 90 seconds. Well, 90 seconds of actual content, and then it keeps cutting back to him for like forever. It feels like just slowly bleeding out. And I might be completely insane for saying this, but I'm pretty sure you can tell from the visuals alone that they're in a different forest than the rest of the actors. Like, I'm not a fucking tree doctor, but there is something about the way that things are shot and how it all looks and feels that tells me they're not even in the same state. It becomes the most obvious when we get to the finale of the movie, where Bruce has to fight Neil in the headquarters of the Hunters, and the living room is bathed in this honestly very strange red light that doesn't fit the visual aesthetic of the movie at all. The movie has not been lit like this at all. It hasn't used harsh colors to its advantage or anything. It's not fucking John Wick, despite its wants to be. It becomes apparent as Bruce steps into the room that it's lit like this because it makes the strikingly obvious green screen Bruce is on read maybe a little better than it would have otherwise. Like, yeah, it still looks awful, but if you stepped into a green screen that was supposed to be this living room lit normally, it would have looked way worse. Suffice to say, the visuals of this movie aren't very good. Not just the green screen. You'd be surprised to hear that this movie is actually sort of sci-fi. There's the holograms, of course, as you know, but there's also a teleportation system and this weird future city they show sometimes, but they show it from so far away the scale seems pathetic. It's a very strange movie overall. It wants to do so many different things, but doesn't have the money or actors to do any of it, but it still tries to do all of it. it. It really suffers from a lack of proportion, I would say, and energy. It's supposed to be about this Hunger Games manhunt thing, but most of the movie is just about the characters standing in the woods projecting their character traits at each other, talking about how wacky and zany and crazy they are. You see Neil McDonough pop up in this movie, and your natural reaction is, damn, they got him too? And then when you sit down to actually watch it, you see that it's one of those movies where the entire marketing budget is based around getting McDonough, and to a larger extent Bruce, to get people to rent this on Peacock based on their names alone. And it probably works too. Old people see the phrase starring Bruce Willis, and they think back to Die Hard and The Sixth Sense and think, oh yeah, that's good enough, I'll watch that. And their brains are so fried from all of the lead poisoning, it probably doesn't even occur to them that 90% of the scenes with Willis are him sitting in the woods, and his only human interaction is with a computer. Figure that one out, old people. These damn kids and their phones. So it's an action movie with basically no action, a main character that has no hand in the little action there is, and a budget that probably had the actors have to pack their own lunches for each day on set. The only saving grace could be the performances, but Bruce is pretty checked out. He doesn't log anything worth talking about, and it sucks because you get the feeling it is because of his age. He just couldn't hang and do the action star stuff anymore. It's pretty sad in that regard. I just don't get why they talked him up of being the King Kong among all these apes if they weren't gonna have him do anything. At least use a body double or something, keep his face obscured. Sure, it sounds tricky, but then you could even keep the deal where Bruce doesn't have to film on the same continent if he doesn't want to. I'm harping on Bruce, I know, but he's barely in the movie. Most of the movie is about the people hunting him down and trying to kill him. They're all a bunch of different Ben and Jerry's flavors of the same trope, overconfident hunter-killer. You've got the LARPer, who thinks he's this badass, but he can scarcely operate his own rifle. You've got the kid who thinks he's prepared for this sort of life, but he gets in over his head. You've got the quiet, serious guy. You've got Neil, who's the calculating sociopath who feels nothing for anyone. Someone dying in front of him is like Tuesday to him. They say he killed his own wife to see if he had it in him. He's that kind of guy. You've got the woman, who these movies love to just throw a woman in there, seemingly just to have one. She doesn't really get to have any special trait because she's a woman, and that's enough to the writer, I suppose. And then you have the wild card, the wackiest of them all, who feels like the actual main character of the movie because he gets the most screen time. He's a former trillionaire who was down to his last billion because he spends so crazily and he has such a fly by the seat of his pants mentality. So yeah, you get what it says on the tin in that case. He is constantly harassing and antagonizing the other hunters because why not, according to him. He treats them like he's their freaky, poorly adjusted big brother that has always been bullying them, and it feels like he's always teetering on doing something way more messed up than he usually does. That's not to say he's intimidating at all, he's just really annoying for the most part. He gets the biggest role as the wild card because Bruce's plan for the movie, rather than all the action star stuff that he could do, is to get them to turn on each other, since killing anyone on the island is allowed. They don't have to hunt only him. Seems like an interesting plan, actually, and it might have been if Bruce had any hand in that idea at all, rather than bringing it up at the start of the event to incept them into thinking it. Mantracker here takes care of the rest. His antagonizing builds up to murdering multiple of his comrades, mostly in scenes with literally no action, and they just stand around and talk about how they're gonna murder each other. The only actual impact action Bruce has on screen because of this is when he actually does share a scene with quiet, serious hunter, and just kind of whoopsie daisies his throat open by the looks of it. The rest of the kills are taken care of by Slim Santa over here, and McDonough gets his hands dirty too. McDonough takes care of the LARPer and Crazy Ass. It's a shame a peer never shows up. That would have made this movie actually a little interesting. And Crazy Ass takes care of the kid after Bruce shoves him down a hill, and the woman in a weird landmine scene that goes on way too long and doesn't make any sense at all. So the woman steps on a landmine and naturally is like, what the hell, disarm it, like she can't step off it, it's a landmine, and he's like, nah, 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 nah. And somehow she tricks him into stepping onto it for her instead before she steps onto another one. So they're both screwed. But actually, less funny Zach Galifianakis has set the mines to these switches as well. And he's so crazy, he just 50-50s it and sets one of them off, killing the girl. And then he just steps off the mine. You can just step off the mine? So what the hell was this entire 5-minute scene about? They could have just walked away or killed each other with guns without all the pomp. Luckily, Neil kills him later and really embarrasses him too. All the killers get to have their one thing they are, and then they all get killed, and none of it is very fun. The least interesting character out of all of them is the hologram woman, who I've never seen in a movie before, and I think there's a good reason for that. She can't deliver a line to save her life. I think they were going with the cold, detached game master who finds this all amusing thing with her, but her deliveries come across more like vapid valley girl who's being fed lines by someone just off the hologram projector. None of them are interesting. Neil gets the closest and probably turns in the best performance, but he has the benefit of just getting to be the cold, psychopathic killer. He just gets to act weirdly alien and distant and talk down to people. He constantly talks to the other hunters like he's better than them, saying that they want to be here hunting Bruce because they're weird murderers, but he needs to be there. It's in his nature. It's natural for him. It's correct. Which, I mean, it might have been interesting to think on that if they did anything with it. If the entire entire movie was just Neil versus Bruce in a one-on-one, and it was an uneven matchup due to Neil's money and the backing of the organization. The movie focused more on the asymmetry of the fight than it did on the hunters screaming their insecurities at each other. Then hey, we could have had a movie here. I think that might demand them both being about 20 years younger too, but if we did this 20 years ago, then we couldn't have had all these crazy high-tech effects that look so cool and good. So I guess you just gotta pick your poison. Your leads are nearly geriatric, so you can't have the action be very raucous, unfortunately. So you've got an action movie with no action. You've got big names like Bruce and Neil, but you don't have the writing to make their characters interesting, and they're too old to vault over a log in the woods or something. The rest of the movie looks terrible and is acted terribly. You're not gonna believe this, but I think this is only the second worst movie in this video, but the truly worst one, like, I'm gonna feel a little bad talking about that one. This one earns my full ire. A movie that didn't have anything interesting to film or write, that tried to sell itself off in the names of its two big leads and then couldn't even manage to get them in the same room together. This one might technically, stress on the word technically, be better than the one I'm gonna talk about later. But if someone forced you to pick 3 movies from this video to watch, I'd advise you to skip this one. Hello, editor's note here. The next Apex movie I was supposed to review for this video, Netflix refuses to play ball and will not let me include any of the review in the video. It's either delete the video or get a copyright strike, so they kind of got me over a barrel here. So I guess the best thing I can do is post this video with reviewing only 3 of the 4 movies on YouTube, and then the 4th movie will be in the Patreon cut. So if you want to see this review on the 4th movie, go watch it on Patreon for just a few bucks. It's a real shame because I actually like this Apex movie, and having this part of the review in here made me seem like not such a miserable asshole because it's all pretty positive. So yeah, sorry that I can't post that part on YouTube. Go watch it on Patreon if you want. If not, we will move on to the next film. This is the one where I think I'm gonna feel bad critiquing the movie, and you can probably already see why. Apex 2025 is reviewed very sparsely online, but the reviews that do exist are pretty vicious. Basically, almost no one has ever heard of this movie, and those who have found reason to curse it, like maybe actually with magic. And for a movie like this, I have a natural reaction to want to hold back a bit, because I mean, look at it. But these will be my genuine thoughts. Apex 2025 this time is about a special forces group tasked with escorting a woman to an underground bunker to retrieve a scientist. The bunker is underground, and it is called Hades. Brilliant. It's mostly not about that. The story seems to be a vehicle for all of these guys to play a role of a badass special forces hero on screen, and they get to smile about it, which is sort of charming in its own way. In a lot of other ways, it feels pretty embarrassing. They're the kind of guys that think all black tactical outfits are cool and on brand for the style of story they're going for, but the main character carries around a katana as well. That's his signature. I swear, anime has really poisoned Western society. Mission accomplished, guys. Soft power achieved. You could tell immediately at a glance that this movie, which I should really hesitate to call a movie since it's not a theatrical length, being only an hour and 10 minutes, and if you take out the studio slides at the start, the extended title sequence introducing all the actors in drawn form, and the credits, the film barely crests an hour. Anyway, about that glance you were taking, you'll notice through it that this movie has about the same production quality as the average YouTube video from a high schooler. And yeah, I know there are probably exceptions to that idea, but I said average. It feels like they had about $200 for the budget, and about 150 of it went to this cool jacket for the main character. It is pretty cool. My favorite thing that I've noticed about this movie is that all of their establishing shots are filmed way more nicely than the rest of the movie. Most of them are drone shots with what seems like way nicer cameras than they're using, but they're all covered up by this weird glitching filter they put over them, and I realized it's most likely because they just ganked the footage from somewhere online and put an effect over it so they hoped no one or no automated system would notice, which is, you know, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. Is there a term for these kind of static shots, the one where the director just sits a camera down on a tripod at a semi-wide angle and just lets the characters go? If there isn't yet, it should be named the Apex 2025 shot because there is a lot of it in this movie. It's shot very boringly, but it's so hard to bully this movie and expect to be able to sleep at night because it's so clear from the production alone that no one has experienced. I don't think anyone has ever taken any courses in filmmaking or read up on any of this at all. They certainly don't have anyone that has a real background in acting. I think they just winged it. And I think there is something to admire in the spirit of that. I think this review is going to be a bit shorter than the other ones because the movie is much shorter than the other two and because there isn't really much that goes on. It's hard to film a movie with interesting stuff that goes on when your technical scope is limited to these awkward static shots where you just sit a camera down on a tripod and call action. I'll give it to the movie though. It seems competent in these dialogue scenes. It never holds awkwardly long on one angle. It keeps an energy to the scenes and switching to close-ups so the character's speaking, shot, reverse shot, that sort of stuff. If it didn't have that, it feels like it would fall from a high school production down to a middle school production. That's about as far as my praise goes for the filming though. Though it uses exclusively static, awkward angles, at least they were proactive enough to use a ton of them. There's this really funny moment where the main character and his wife hug early on. He's just returned from a dangerous mission, you see. What a relief. So naturally, a hug. And when they hug, you can hear the mic one of them is wearing get muffled and bumped up against, and they just left it in. I don't know if they didn't catch it or if they didn't know they could get rid of it in the edit, but you just sort of furrow your brow at that kind of stuff and think, come on guys, is that a point? If you're putting your heart and soul behind this, we should have enough polish to remove something like that. Should I feel bad for harping on the production quality? I don't know. Would you feel bad if you were critiquing Burger King and you said it tasted bad? It's like, it's right there. It's so front and center. It's hard to ignore. You gotta give it its beatings. It's funny, I was watching the movie for the first time and suddenly there was a shot that looked much nicer than I was expecting, but it turns out an ad had started. So this movie doesn't even have internet advertisement level of production, it seems. Do I need to mention that the action is bad? It is, but funnily enough, it might be actually better than Apex with Bruce. At least there's some actual thought put into the fights, though it is poorly executed. They gave it a shot. It's awkward and ugly and you don't believe it for a second, but they went out and said, all right, we're filming a couple fights and we're gonna make it work. And they didn't. They fucked it all up. But I truly do respect the attempt when your team is so obviously inexperienced. Also, I guess you would call this a nitpick, but I always find this so annoying. Why would you ever hold a sword like this? With a knife, at least it makes sense. You're so much more mobile and you have more moves available to you. But with a sword this long, you just look like an idiot. You cut your moveset by like 90%. It's just for the style points. I mean, I guess, man. Fucking anime, I swear. Okay, let's critique the movie now, not just the filming of it. You saw our opening scene earlier, where the good guy and the bad guy both just naturally carry around katanas, sigh, and that was to introduce you to our band of hardened badasses that serve as our main cast. I don't want to be a total asshole here, but when I'm watching it, you can't help but feel that this is just a big self-insert fantasy for the lot of them, where they all get to be stoic, hyper-capable badasses doing heroic shit on screen. It becomes even harder to fight off that feeling once you learn that the main character is also the director, and that realization adds an air of immaturity to the whole thing. It'd be one thing if the movie was written to be about all these guys doing generic action hero stuff by someone else. It was someone else's vision to tell a story of a strike team of tough guys and an emotionless leader who carries around a katana and doesn't afraid of anything. But they wrote this for themselves, and it would be great if this was just a high school project. This would be a stunning accomplishment if it was just a high school project, but these are grown-ass adults that wrote this for themselves. Right, sorry, I was trying to get away from the meta-commentary. The movie is about the team having to go into a lab escorting this lady to find a man. The first half of the movie is that opening action scene, and then telling her team we're going back out into the field, and then recruiting a couple of red shirts to die, and most importantly, setting up the family troubles the main character faces. He has a wife and a son who shows up for a few lines, but mostly just a wife who doesn't want him doing this Black Ops soldier shit anymore because she's worried he'll get killed one of these times. And yeah, it makes perfect sense. A little bit of an emotional core to the movie. The main character feels the pull to hang up the dual Berettas and retire to his modest suburban home. And he actually does in that opening scene to set that up, but after he gets called back to work, every time his wife brings it up to him that she hates what he does, all he does is stonewall her and stare at her like she's being annoying. The same thing happens with his brother-in-law, his wife's brother, who was on the strike team, who's telling him the same thing, that he should just retire and live a good life with his sister. And he looks at him like he's nagging him about taking the trash out. Why set up the want to retire at the start if he was going to spend the rest of the hour that this movie takes up looking at the people like they're scum for suggesting the same thing? The answer to that question is the director and main character thinks stoicness is enough to create an interesting character. He is the ultimate badass. Whenever someone brings up retiring because they're worried about him, it's, they don't need to be worried, I could handle it. But he would never say that out loud because he's so quiet and stoic and badass. He kills the first villain with a single anime slash. He's just cool and can handle all this shit and is generally without emotion, thus creating a very manly idol for anyone with a 2-digit IQ that might come across this movie. He is tough and manly and quiet and stoic and gets the job done, and whoever wrote this thinks that's enough. I know I already mentioned John Wick in the Apex review from earlier, but it warrants bringing up here again. They seem to want to capture a John Wick-esque character, because on a surface level, John Wick is that tough, manly, quiet, and stoic guy that just gets the job done. But if you dig down even a nanometer into that character, you see that he is deeply emotional. The first 25 minutes of the first movie is setting up how he is going through a lot emotionally, though he tries to hide it. And then the rest of that movie is him going on a rampage because he's emotional. He's not just some robot set to the eye roll and kill setting. So our main character's motivation is muddled for the whole movie. He doesn't really have one other than shrugging and saying that he has to do this mission because his boss told him to. He doesn't struggle with the reality of the danger of his job or maybe think that someone else is right. There's no story around the main character. He's just tough. And I'm afraid that is not enough. The actual overarching story of the entire thing, I'm sure you're wondering at this point since I've surely shown scenes of Act 3 of this movie. It's like I mentioned, it's about getting this woman into this lab, but it turns out it was all a trap. This woman's father was working on the Apex Serum, or Apex program, one of the two, which is an attempt to further human evolution by turning us all into monsters. That's why there are weird people running around with Halloween masks on. They're not supposed to be Halloween masks in the movie, they're supposed to be what these people actually look like. Maybe they shouldn't have sprung for such a nice jacket. It was a trap because this lady led them into this situation knowing it was all messed up down here because her father was the lead scientist doing these experiments, and she hates him and even killed him because she was horrified horrified to find the kind of work he was doing. Okay, that's sort of interesting. So this lady seems to have a bit of a character to her. She's in this gray area. So she's down here to destroy all the monsters and end her father's work. No, she's here to take advantage of the monsters and sell the formula to the highest bidder. Oh, then why'd you kill your dad? I mean, it doesn't go into it. Oh, and also the main character's boss was in on it too. He knew he was sending them into the bunker with the monsters that kill you. I assume that beat is in here so the main character can go back and big dog him at the end of the movie because he is, of course, the most alpha of them all. The fact that he was taking orders in the first place was frankly embarrassing. You won't believe it, there's even sequel bait to end the movie. Some shit like, this conspiracy goes right to the top. Did I go too hard in this movie? It is pretty bad, man, but there's also an optimism to it that I sort of like. The movie's a bit embarrassing to think about, but it doesn't have the horrible taste that something like Apex does, where it's just using big names and a horrible nothing story to try and make a buck. This one has spirit, if nothing else, and it really has nothing else. If you watch my other video reviewing every movie named Time Lapse, you'll remember that I had to watch Nemesis 3 Time Lapse, and from the trailer I was tricked into thinking it was going to be this self-aware, high-flying, stupid-ass action movie with horrible, cheesy effects. And I was let down terribly when it turned out to be the most boring thing ever in the entire universe. I was hoping it would at least be bad and fun to watch. And while this movie doesn't get up to that quality or vibe I was looking for either, it does get much closer. Apex is about a guy who time travels to an alternate timeline that is filled with killer robots because he went back in time to save a kid from a killer robot that he sent back in time for basically no reason. This requires some explaining. Okay, so Nick here works for Apex, which is unfortunately not the name of a gorilla supervillain. It's this future organization that for some reason sends drones back in time to study the past. The thing is that we're only in 2072 here. It's not even that far flung of a future even. 80 years or so from the release of this movie, and they sent the robot back 100 years to 1972. My thing is that right now, like, we know about 1972 in real life. It's not like ancient Egypt or something. Fucking American Pie came out in 1972. We know about 1972. But they seem to be fixed on this idea, so they send back an honestly hokily designed, but also charmingly designed robot through the time vortex back into the horrific 1972 desert. It's one of those time travel stories that if anything from the future comes into contact with a person or changes some events of the past, the entire future will change. And you can't send people back in time because if you go back in time, you get some sort of time virus that is extremely viral and deadly, thus the need for robots. Of course, when they send the robot back in time to the hell-scorched rocky desert, for what reason is lost on me, I guess to look at rocky terrain, it comes across a family that's broken down on the road, which of course immediately starts affecting the timeline. Now, our first major question of the movie's logic comes up here. If the goal is to have the least amount of effect on the past as possible, why would they send back robot drones that have laser cannons strapped to their arms that act autonomously as soon as they figure they're affecting the timeline by being observed? Wouldn't them exploding people affect the timeline even more? Of course, this all happens, and Nick from the future can't just sit here and watch this happen, so he launches himself back in time to try and help this kid and his family, setting the events of the movie into motion. After he saves the family, luckily a new portal opens back to the future, seemingly for no reason after you watch the whole movie. You know what? Let's knock that all out right now. The logic of the movie's time travel elements seem to be hugely, fundamentally flawed. So because of what Nick has done, he travels back to a future of this new timeline he's created, where the original drone has already altered things, meaning that this timeline, by the drone's logic, must be eliminated. So now there's this army of drones from Nick's original timeline constantly waging war on this timeline. He's truly fucked it all up, right? But after Nick left and started affecting time, we see that in his original timeline, people just started to be chillingly deleted, as if that timeline just will not come to pass anymore. They just go, "Bwah," and are erased completely. So the question of where these drones are really coming from is, I guess, just unanswered. The movie seems to want to be about alternate realities more than any real time travel plot, because Nick comes back to 2073, a year after when he initially leaves. So it's like, that, where the hell are these things coming from? And you might think, well, maybe it's an even further future, and besides, all of Nick's original friends got deleted from existence. But no, the time travel logic is fucked in ways I've never even thought about, to tell you the truth. There's some kind of reasoning that some things just tanked the transition from one time stream to another. No real explanation why. And it turns out that the lab Nick used to work at to do his time travel work still exists, despite no one having ever created it in this world. It's still just here. And also, the movie plays around the logic that Nick has always existed in this time as well. He's an army guy in this one. He has relationships and a job as some kind of low-ranking commando. And now that he's traveled here, his consciousness is inhabiting the Nick that has always been present here. See, it feels more like an Another World story more than time travel. So the first, I'm gonna say 60% of the movie is all this setup, and then Nick wandering around the new apocalyptic world being utterly baffled that no one knows him the way that they used to in his time. Over and over, he's like, "What, you don't recognize me? We were good friends," or "You were my wife." It starts to get a little silly at a point that he just can't seem to get that these people are different. There's also this ongoing thing of a lot of people in this time that are affected by some terrible plague, something that no one can figure out where or why it started, and Nick seems equally as confused by it, but you, having not seen the movie and having only heard me describe the answer to this question in one sentence a couple minutes ago, you know the answer to it, right? I'll give you a second. Yes, that's right, Nick was patient zero for the virus. It's the time virus, and he affected that family he saved, and probably millions of people for a century afterwards by extension. Nick somehow doesn't put this together until the very end. Don't worry though, it doesn't seem like the virus really has any ill effects on people, other than they get treated very poorly. It doesn't seem like they get sick or anything, so no sweat. After we get everything set up, and Nicholas and every other character and the audience are finally all on the same page, the movie is about Nick taking his team out to the lab that tanked the timeline switch, so he can hopefully get it back up and operational again and make a portal to get back to his own timeline. You see, this is what I mean. What the hell is the logic there? You're going to travel in time to when? You're in time, my man. How are you going to go to a future that has never happened anymore? It's basically just a portal back to his world, but the movie refuses to think of it that way. So most of the movie from this point on is Nick and his team plodding through the sun-punished desert, running into the laser cannon robots once every 10 to 15 minutes and having a fight with them. Nick's team consists of the simplest, most obvious caricatures for any army squadron that you can think of. You've got the leader, a no-nonsense hard-ass that yells out orders and will not observe any dissension without any anger or threats in response. He is quick-thinking and narrow-minded, and despite having the haircut to do it, he doesn't think to zone out the robots with a single sonic boom the entire movie, so I don't know why he's in command here. Then we have the kid here, who is the tech guy. He's kind of meek and passive, and he's got a big heart and always wants to do good for the people where he can. He's probably the most boring out of all of them. I'm not naming any of these characters because I've watched the movie twice, and I literally can't remember any of their names other than Nick, and I'm not watching it again, man. Screw you. Next, we have the black guy, who is playing the stereotypical black guy role. He is animatedly pissed and cursing about everything, delivering funny one-liners about how pissed he is and about how bad everything that happens is. I guess he stands in for the comedic aspects of the movie, though none of it's very funny. You have Nick, your everyman and main character, the Genu of the Apex movies, I would say. And then you have Nick's wife, who isn't his wife anymore in this timeline, which is what the underlying secondary plot is about. What, you weren't expecting this movie to be a love story? Well, it's not really. All that amounts to is Nick being like, but you're my wife for the first half of the movie, and then being like, I wish you were still my wife for the second half. You see what I mean with the most generic cast ever thing, right? Hard-ass leader, scaredy cat tech guy, everyman, funny black guy, woman. If you were creatively bankrupt and you didn't know some loser cartoon watcher from 30 years in the future would be the first one to watch your movie in 29 years and put it on blast on the internet, you also might fall into this very trap. Nick's wife actually gets to have the most personality of the cast, though, because she's been done the most dirty by the timeline switch. Not only does she have to live in the derelict robot-dominated hellscape, she's now suffering from the time virus, as you can see. She looks very ill. And she lost the gem of a husband Nick must have been, and she doesn't even know it. Truly tragic. And with Nick acting weird around her the entire movie, at least she gets to be like, what the hell is wrong with this guy? And then as the film goes on, she warms up to him a bit, and there's a little something there. The movie loses the plot in and of itself as it goes on, though. As they get into the lab from the other future, this future starts to break down for some reason. I really cannot put together why. To start the movie, in Nick's future, people just started getting deleted because he changed the timeline, but it doesn't seem like there's any good reason for it to happen this time. I guess the robots are just winning. Maybe the logic is that the robots aren't supposed to be here too, so it's making the timeline unstable anyway. The movie does a really poor job of explaining it. It's almost devoid of logic entirely. Or maybe it's because Nick is close to getting the lab working? Who knows? The commander of the entire operation gets what? And lead commando turns around and hits him with the strangest line read I've ever seen. Commander! Did this feel at all natural for seeing that? Would your reaction from seeing someone just get digitally squished out of existence not be one of abject horror? I think I would just start crying. Like, what the complete fuck did I just see? There used to be a guy there. Then we get to the next scene and he hears about another dude he came across earlier in the movie also getting time crushed, and he just purses his lips and trods along. Maybe this guy is the right guy for the job. His mentality is diamonds. You can't shake this guy. The third act of the movie is getting power back to the lab, a lab that the current day military was unaware of despite being within hiking distance of it, and it has this weird ass future technology inside. No wonder they're losing to the robots. They don't even have basic reconnaissance. There's an underlying tension of the squad once we reach here as well, because Nick saves them from the base self-destructing because he knows the code to the door because of his job back home. So they're all naturally like, what the frig, man? How do you know about all this stuff? And why did you bring us here in the first place? Why do you know this was here? Why aren't you telling us anything? And Nick can't tell him he knows because he's from an alternate future, because one, that sounds insane, and two, because it's his fault their timeline is infested with killer robots, and they're his new friends. Seems like social suicide to me. He'd probably feel even worse if he had the mental capacity to put two and two together, that he was ground zero for the virus that is passively killing humanity while the robots are actively killing humanity. You may be thinking at this point that, wow, Nick seems like a real asshole for all of this, and I think you'd be right. I know it all stems from him trying to save that family, but he doesn't seem to have any remorse for anything that's happened, and he gladly puts the lives of his team on the line to do this thing that will benefit literally only him and get him back home. They all die horribly, by the way, every single one of them. His wife gets riddled with bullets, funny black guy gets erased from time, nerd gets blown up, and Sergeant Cockthunder gets a hole blown through him the size of a basketball. He gets them all killed so he can go back home. Not exactly a legendary hero by my measure. When he finally does jump back through the portal, the movie hits you with this buildings being rebuilt montage, as if him going back into his own timeline saves this one somehow, which I guess it could. He goes back to before the first drone that ran into that family was ever sent, and with how the time travel works in this movie, it doesn't mean that there's two of them now. His experiences and mind just combined with the brain of the Nick from where he just traveled to, meaning that he could stop them from sending the first robot back and prevent all of this from happening, I suppose. But to me, I guess, doesn't that just prevent the entire other timeline from happening? What if he prevents thousands or millions of people from being born in the first place, depriving them of life? Is that ethical? I know they'd be doomed to a horrible killer robot plague-dominated apocalypse, but is Guile still alive in this current timeline? What about the funny black guy? There are no analogs for them that he knows of in his current timeline, or does that alternate world still exist and it's just nice now? It's impossible to tell because the movie tells the story like an M.C. Escher painting was given sapience and tasked to write a screenplay. Now, this movie is bad, obviously, I trust you gathered, but I can't help but compare it to Nemesis 3 because it's obvious there should be a comparison. Time travel movie set in a desert with robots and guns and explosions, and compared to that mess, this is like Shawshank. There's actually a bit of a story, some attempts at characters at least, even though it doesn't work. At least it seems like they're trying. It actually doesn't look all that bad a lot of the time either. It looks like it's from 1994 because it is, but there's interesting lighting sometimes, and there's some money put into the sets and props, and the actors seem to be actors. Nick logs a completely acceptable performance as the leading man. He never seems uncomfortable in his own skin, other than the times he's uncomfortable in his own skin, but that's like part of the story. And all the other characters seem like they've heard of the practice of acting before signing up at least. It's not all bad. Nemesis 3 is all bad. This is just really bad. So that's it. All the Apexes, all of them reviewed. If I was going to rank them in order, it would go from best to worst. Obviously, Apex is best, and then I put Apex second, Apex third, and then Apex, of course, was terrible. Patreon shoutouts. If you want to see 2 brand new videos from me ahead of the YouTube release, you can support me on Patreon for just a few bucks. Link, as always, is in the description below the video. Biggest shoutouts of all go to my top patrons, Insomnite, who gets the ability to literally shift the momentum of any sport they're playing, usually causing everyone to fall over. Kevin Bartlin, who I saw hit a fadeaway jumper into the opposing trench in World War I when a grenade landed at his friend's feet. Midnight Balsams, who can purify dirty water by singing hallelujah at it. The church refuses to recognize it as a miracle, and I can't believe it. Tater of Tots, who starts strangely beeping if there's metal below him, just like one of those detectors. They get through metal detectors at the airport, no problem though. Very strange. Blanco, who was synced to the International Space Station's nuclear clock, so you know if they're late, it's as fashionably late as possible. The former meaning of life, who has won every major trophy in everything. Football, lawn care, dog grooming, the basketball, you know, all of them, man, all of them. The 1 AM party, who has wall hacks in real life. And Whitrow, who can see and hear ghosts, but strangely there doesn't seem to be any humans. It's only bug ghosts. And my god, Overanalyzers, Two Boots Are Beat, Blade Dancer, Danny Stevens, Dr. Xerox, Dominic Saint, Aaron Grace, Jackson, Jeremy Rubenstein, John Warhammer, Joshy Poo, Juppy Huppy the Yuppie Guppy, Kiro Magnus, Marshall Rattler, Mitchell Gobrecht, Nick, Philip Jindra, Ryan Maxwell, Scoobert, Shane Antonacci, Z the last Patreon you will say, and some sort of bare face. I don't know. Next up, should we get around to Invincible Season 4 before the live-action Avatar stuff comes out? Nah, we'll wait on that still.